I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Yeah. Let's go. Quick intro, because Jackie's here. I'm excited.
Let's get it.
Everybody, what's up? What's going on? Welcome to, again, of course, this is I Mix What I Like live. I'm Jared Ball, your host. Happy to be so. Black Power Media, BPM in the building. And of course, as I said, very excited that the prophetess, the empress, Jackie Lukman has jumped in to join us this morning. It's good to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for, tolerating me for your in your space. A therapist was like, you really need to, socialize more. I'm like, you mean like talk to people?
Talk to people?
Okay.
That's too much. That's my bad. I had
like
to change
outside
the
of work?
background.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it is good, and I'm very glad that you're always welcome, and this is our space. So I'm very glad that you took the opportunity to jump in with us, and we do have a lot to get to. I was happy to make some slight adjustments to my plan. I was going to play some video clips, but I think we could just talk about it since you're here when we get to that particular issue about the MPP party. But before we get to that, there are a couple things I want to get to because, well, really what I'm saying is in a buildup to again, the argument or the context being an argument around the after party and why we need some other way of addressing ourselves to electoral politics and political power. There's some interesting things happening in the world that I thought we could talk about this morning. But the first thing I wanted to ask you about, though, Jackie, is, are you on tonight? Is Dr. Tawhid coming on? Is that tonight? Is that
no? That was
tonight?
Last week. I had Dr. Tawhid last week, and that was right before the thing with Dr. Carr and
okay, right. I saw that. I thought you were saying, okay, my bad. I thought it was happening every week. It's not happening every week?
Every third Friday.
Every third Friday. Okay.
But,
okay.
Dr. Tawhid really loves it. So if I ask him to come back to do a special thing on, say, I don't know, crypto,
Well, I would love that. Selfishly, I would love that. But actually, the question I was going to request, I was going to like when I used to be trifling and go up to the DJ table, which you're never supposed to do, and make a request. I know you're never supposed to do that. You're not supposed to bother the DJ.
You're not supposed to do that?
I think it's one of those unwritten rules.
I did not know that because I would do that all the time.
I do it all the time. It's terrible. But I was going to humbly request a song from you and Dr. Tawhid, which would be a conversation around how war, even in Ukraine and Russia, would impact African people, the African world, and labor. Specifically because I did watch, because just a shout out, tomorrow I'm gonna be on with Ramon Sebastian Funes on his channel, which is a great real leftist internationalist channel, and he said he wants to talk about Russia, Ukraine. I'm not at least part of the discussion. That's way outside my expertise. So I've been listening with a different and more attentive ear to folks like you and Sean and others. But I did watch Eugene and Rania Khalek's live stream yesterday, which I thought on Breakthrough News, which I thought was very, very good and helpful. Yeah. And one of the points that was raised very quickly by the both of them was the impact of this conflict that it will have in West Africa, specifically around wheat production, and the Middle East, of course, around gas and everything else. And they didn't go. So then I thought of the book Modern Africa by the late Basil Davidson, one of the few white historians in African history that got a lot of respect. And in that book, he talked about the impact on African labor that was had by the world wars, which is something that is never talked about. So I thought immediately Jackie and Dr. Tawhid. That was going to be, so even if it happens in a couple of weeks, because unfortunately this is not likely to be over by then anyway. That's my when I bump into the DJ table and say, can you play my favorite songs?
No, yeah, we're on the same wavelength because I was going to ask him to come back and do a special segment, a particular segment on, the economic impact on a full out boots on the ground hot war in the, as far as economics for Black folks are concerned, and everything else that he would want to, because there are those aspects of this that I don't quite understand. Like I just learned yesterday that Russia apparently is like the world's leading producer of wheat. I did not know that, or provider of wheat, because you don't produce wheat, you grow it. But I did not know that. And that has a lot of implications for our folks, and especially us country farmer folks. It's like we got all this land in this country, and this government is paying farmers not to grow, importing food from other places. And so it's just really, there's a whole lot of stuff. But then that also, interestingly, I've been like secretly on the down low radicalizing my church. But our Board of Social Action has been planning a series of webinars on why Christians need to oppose war. We were planning this like a month ago. We started planning this last month. And we had planned to do a webinar on Ukraine in particular on March 19th. We're still going to do that. And we're not going to be, probably not going to be able to move it up sooner. I'm not sure, but we're going to have, so far we've got Medea Benjamin, Phil Waledo, a sister from, who is a clergy member, who is a member of BAP. And I'm waiting for another member of BAP to talk about it. But these are all things that that I'm like working on, trying to like parse out these connections between what's going on in Ukraine and why all of this really does matter, not only to Africans here, but Africans on the continent and all of us, and why we should really, really care about all of this. So yeah, all of this is really great.
Okay, so good, very good. So we'll definitely stay on top of that. A couple, and I look forward to all of those discussions. Yeah, and again, greetings to all the folks piling in, and welcome again to Mani Nile. Welcome. And Nathaniel Turner, welcome to you as well. And as members, I hope you all will join us at 10 a.m. for our little fun discussion and viewing. So, by the way, speaking of Ramon, that brother Ramon's channel, I'm not saying his name right. That's not his name. Ramiro, Sebastian. Let me just call him Sebastian for now.
Oh, that's somebody. I was like,
I'm not saying his name right. My bad. This is terrible. I'm not saying his name right. Sebastian Funes is the last half. If I'm
okay.
But anyway, I'll get that straight. I'll get that straight. That's my fault. But a point came up. I was in his live chat Ramiro. That's right. Thank you, Dave. I know, because I see all of us are over there anyway. So like I know it's there's a lot of overlap in audiences. Oh, that's messed up. That's messed up, Silver.
I didn't want to say
that's
it.
messed up. That's messed up. That's messed up. But that's messed up. But he was showing some videos. They were watching videos of mainstream news that they were gonna, and there was like a discussion in the chat about this is really the only way psychologically we should be watching that kind of media. So I was thinking, so I got this. So because I'm teaching this hip hop class again this semester, and because Boyce Watkins did a video about hip hop rappers, celebrity, and economics, students who are, more than I'm comfortable with are aware of Boyce Watkins, and it came up in my feed. I watched 6.5 minutes of the video and was like, I can't do this by myself. So that's why I was like, that's why the video was titled Not By Myself. I'm thinking like we started a little series. We should start a little series. So it's for members only, starting today after today's show at 10 o'clock. And then in between, because at 11 o'clock, Ajamu Baraka, Duruba Ben Wahad, and Kalanji on the Riot Starter are going to be getting down. So you really just should be here on BPM all day. And members, you can do this without any interruption. So anyway, so I want us to watch this video together at 10 o'clock because I can't do it by myself. It can't be by myself. So
it's like watching horror movies. I get it. I get
exactly.
it.
I mean, I made it 6.5 minutes, 6 minutes and 36 seconds to be exact. And I was like, I'm out. So anyway, yeah, damn, Daruba and Ajamu and Kalanji's wild ass is hosting. So that's good.
He's been very subdued lately. I've been just I've been a little bit proud of him, but a little bit like, is he okay? Is he all right?
Like what happened to Kalanji? So yeah,
what's going on? But I want to shout out real quick, Monty,
sure.
Nile, and whoever also was, about the church thing. People, I get on this all the time, and me and Abdus were on this all the time. People don't understand there's a whole radical history, the whole Black radical tradition in the church in this country that has been forgotten, like so much of our history. We're talking about Albert Cleage, who spoke. I think he invited Malcolm X to Detroit to speak.
That's right.
And in Detroit, where Malcolm delivered part of one iteration of his message to the grassroots speech. And Malcolm had mad respect for Albert Cleage.
That's right.
Reverend Cleage started the, I always get the name of it's the Shrines of the Black Madonna Pan-Africanist Orthodox Christian Church. I think that's what it's called now. There are 3 of them in the U.S. now, but James Cone and a bunch of other Black pastors endorsed the Black Power movement, tied Black Power to liberation theology in a big full-page ad they took out in the New York Times that you can't find the text for anymore. Interestingly, but I was researching that to see what's in it. It's amazing. And James Cone himself is like the father of Black liberation theology.
No question. And I used to have a cassette tape with Reverend Cleage. I used to say Cleage.
Is it Cleage?
I don't know. I'm probably wrong, but
he changed his name later, which was like kind of weird. But
okay, well,
yeah, it was like the messenger of such and such and savior. I was like, okay, come on, dude. But yeah, it was
well. Okay. He was on this with Dr. Clark, John Henrik Clark, and a couple of others in the debate. Well, it wasn't a debate; it was a discussion. It was titled "Was Jesus Black?" And that was that was. I do remember I had that. So yeah, but folks, yes, today at 11 o'clock. So after this show, and then after our Boyce Watkins collective viewing session, and then you all can stick around and of course watch. So really, no disrespect to you or me, I think today, Jackie, but we are clearly the show opener for Daruba and Ajamu. So I'm good with that, but I'm just saying,
look, I'm totally good with being the show opener for those two.
Yeah, that's gonna be sharp. Mm-hmm. So a couple other things before that I need to get. So one thing I'm very excited about. There's something that's slowly developing. So folks, I've already said. Some of you may have heard me say already that Paul Grave has invited a second edition of the Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power. I'm very excited about that, even if I'm not admittedly thrilled about having to go back to work. So I've already had one. I did this. I want to do another one because I don't know how much time I have before I resubmit a proposal for what updates I'd like to make. But I'm inviting some suggestions. So I did my first ever Twitter Spaces the other day, and we had a nice discussion about what could go in an update of a second edition. I got a lot of good notes. We had someone come on in particular from the Black trans community and asked what specifically would my book do to address their particular concerns. And we had a very interesting discussion because I said initially the book addresses Black people collectively, which I would think would help every segment of the Black community, but specific to that part of the community, I didn't have anything. But then we started through a discussion, said, well, why don't I look into updating the use of not only the Black community, but segments, but sections of the Black community, as it's been done with Black girl magic and things like that, to use Black womanhood as a way to promote Black capitalism. Why don't we look into the way marketing is addressing itself to the Black trans community, trying to make similar overtures? And then there was a fascinating discussion about to what extent the Black trans community has been kept out of marketing and advertising spaces, and even where they have been denied contracts as participants, so in advertising. So that's just, anyway, so it's a fascinating tributary that I would like to explore, and among several others that were brought up. So I do want to do another one of those, public discussions, but I also invite people. You can hit me up, imixwhatilike@gmail or wherever, and let me know what you think about what you would like to see, including some constructive criticism about how the book just could be made better in general. And the other thing that I think I can share, and I'm excited to share, is that it looks like, and we're going to be talking about his work here shortly, that my man Derek Hamilton is going to write a foreword for it. So initially, I told Palgrave at the first time I didn't want anybody to do that work. And I didn't want anybody, and I had several reasons we can maybe come back to about why. But for this one, I've invited him to help me make it better, and then to even write a foreword. He said he would do it. And so I look forward to that. So anyway, there's a lot. I'm very, very excited about that, and I wanted to just share a little bit of that quickly this morning as well.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that this is happening. This is really good, because that needs to be expanded upon, and that's real exciting that Derek Hamilton is going to do that.
Yeah, and then also, and then we'll definitely have I'm going to at least propose that they let me have the space for a chapter on crypto, to talk about crypto. So like, get that out there as well, But okay, real quick, on Monday, when on Here on A Mix What I Like, we're going to have, first of all, I should say at 9:00, we're going to have, man, there's a lot happening. At 9:00 this morning, we're going to be joined by Bay Brath to talk about the Bay Brath Foundation and Bay Brath himself, who was a giant. We just put that together recently, so that didn't have a chance to really promote that. So I'm very excited about that. So be sure to stay tuned, invite others to join in, tweet out the show, whatever people do, let people know to jump on in. Monday, and then Monday morning, BAP, PACA, WPFW superstar Net for Freeman's coming on, because he and my man Diedrich Muhammad are going to have a short, loving debate about a recent article Diedrich co-authored, in which he referenced Stokely Carmichael Kwame Ture about what we're talking about today in terms of political power and economic power. Netfa and I, to a certain extent as well, disagreed with a little bit of the framing, but I'm just going to moderate and host, and Netfa and Diedrich are going to discuss that at 9:30 on Monday morning. Netfa will join us a little earlier Monday, so definitely stick around for that. Then, okay, another thing, because of this hip hop thing, this class, right? So Jackie, I think you'll appreciate, everybody here will appreciate this. So I'm watching this Hassan Campbell thing and showing it we're talking about in the class. He's talking about Africa Bambaataa, the Zulu Nation, and all the horrors and the nightmares, which we should all probably have to come back and talk more about.
Yeah. And
I'm watching in the chat, and the anti-soda folks were all up in the chat at first, right? and one of them says, I'm from South Africa. I'm an actual Zulu, and I hate what you Americans have done with our Zulu nation and the Zulu naming. And I just sat, and I did that. So I'm watching the chat, though. I'm just watching, and then I should probably go back again. We should look at it, but there was a response that I really appreciated, where somebody said, in somewhat of a friendly way, but there are currently gangs right now in South Africa called the Americans and the Young Americans, who are terrorizing the Black community down there. So the response was like,
isn't that appropriate though?
so I get it's not a one-to-one. You're right. The Zulu and Americans are not, you know, and it is probably appropriate. But the point I was that as I took it was there is all this cross-pollination in the African world and influence in the African world. And yes, of course, not everybody gets it right. You know what I mean? Not everybody is, you know, but I just appreciated that. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And I just, so I just put soda in the comment and kept it moving. I just
there's all this, you know, there's all this we ain't African going on over here, you know, but the actual Africans are like, well, we gonna borrow from you. I don't.
So
and then actually act like Americans.
Now that part, so that would be the fair argument. Like these gangsters in South Africa are behaving more akin to their name than perhaps, at least in this instance, African Bambaataa was behaving as a Zulu should behaving. And then there was this other clip that I was going to play, but we don't have time this morning, where Melly Mel is on DJ Vlad, and I had never seen this, and DJ Vlad is a whole other contradiction. But Melly Mel says we all knew going back to the day that Bambaataa was doing this. He said it was known. Everybody knew it. And I'm just sitting there saying,
what?
I didn't know what to say. I watched it. I said, so you all knew this and nobody interfered? Nobody. And that's why, by the way, Hassan Campbell is where he is now, and sometimes behaving as some feel inappropriately, but he was getting abused and getting set up to commit murders for Bambaataa, as he says, allegedly. That's his, you know. And then you all know this, and nobody. I can't imagine being in spaces. Now, I have to admit, I've been in spaces where men in our circles, expanded circles, have at times even been violent with women in their lives. And given a certain context or history, sometimes it was addressed, but sometimes it wasn't addressed. And I've been guilty of that as well, like historically. Like I haven't always stepped in when I thought this might be going on because I thought it wasn't my business, I wasn't close enough, whatever my excuse was. But I can't imagine, and no disrespect to, I'm not trying to just be disrespectful to women suffering anything, but I cannot imagine pedophilia and child abuse going on.
And nobody says or does anything to protect children, which, that's definitely,
So, and then Bam was the money, but also, as they've talked about, Bam was also a super thug with a lot of gangsters in his circle too. So like there was some, I would suspect, fear out of, if I challenge this, I'm going to get hurt. And in fact, Hassan Campbell has alleged that people who historically did try to challenge it have disappeared. So I don't know, but I'm just saying it was just, I don't know. That was just a little bit of side trauma that we could get to. Okay. All right.
Side trauma.
Just side trauma. You know what I mean? It's just some quick side. You got your main dish of trauma, and then you got your side dish.
Little capitalism, imperialism, a little trauma on the side.
Little trauma on the side. A little the garnish. It's the garnish, right? It's the. All right, so I mentioned Derek Hamilton, and again, I'm a serial offender. I cannot, for some reason, I have a mental block about writing down who is giving me these. Somewhere I got this link, and this is where I would want us to sort of make the sort of official transition quickly to talk about the point about the after party. This discussion between Derek Hamilton and RAÚL Carrillo. Is that how Carrillo?
RAÚL Carrillo. That's how I
RAÚL Carrillo. That's how I would, yes. Inflation, race. Say it again.
I said he probably look at me funny and be like, "Oh, She
Oh,
tried, but okay.
she tried. These poor Anglophones. And then looking at me worse, like he married a Latina and he still can't get it. Like that's like, dang. It's anyway, inflation, race, and labor, an interview with Derek Hamilton. I thought this it's already linked in the show notes below. I think it's a fascinating approach to a discussion of economics and politics. And I think says a lot about what I think we could be bringing into an electoral approach, umbrella labeled an after party approach. And in a sense, it goes very well with everything that I know a lot of us have been saying, that even could be considered in league with what is being said about Ukraine and Russia right now, that there are things that are happening. And then, of course, there are narratives that are created to explain and justify or frame them. So as is the case here, where they're having a discussion about, again, economics and politics, Hamilton's response to this initial question of elaborating on unemployment, inflation, prices, etc. Hamilton says here, among other things, my concern is the use of politically exaggerated anxiety around inflation as a pretense that this economic stimulus and expansionary labor market needs to be cooled down. So again, just for my own purposes, Jackie, others, as a reminder, I don't approach this as a so-called trained economist, someone who studies political economy on the side all of his life, maybe, who reads these reports, whose training officially is in other fields, but and part of which encourages me to see what these narratives are, to see how things are framed and discussed. And this is what appealed to me greatly in this discussion here. In this point about a pretense that economic stimulus and expansionary labor markets need to be cooled down. Our concern is the extent to which the concern with price stability is being manipulated to thwart fiscal policies that would promote more stable employment with higher wages and better working conditions. So what they start doing, and what Hamilton is essentially saying in this, is a lot about that resonates with my own argument, that we need political power, we need to impose policy, and to, as Dr. King was arguing and many others, that if there is going to be a correction to the economic inequality, this needs to be this is a political issue. This is federal government policy issue. That this is not habits, this is not buying consumption habits and behavior, this is not financial literacy. This is something bigger than that. And ultimately what drives this discussion here is that fact, at least as I interpret it. So go ahead. Yeah, jump in if you. Yeah.
No, I think we talked about this. Dr. Tauheed and I talked about this. Well, Dr. Tauheed talked about this. Let me not frame that incorrectly. Dr. Tauheed explained this, and I listened and learned about the impact of the Federal Reserve raising interest rates, and people don't pay any attention to that, and the connection between the Federal Reserve raising their interest rates they'll say something like, oh, we're going to raise interest rates, 0.25%, right? And then there's a different interest rate for banks, but then the interest rate that we see is including the very small interest rate for banks. Banks borrow money from the Federal Reserve, and the interest rate that we get for our car loan, that our, for our insurance, or, mortgages and credit cards and that kind of thing, that interest rate, our interest rate has the percentage of inflation added onto the interest rate that the Federal Reserve offers the banks, and then the interest rate that the banks adds on to that so that they can make money. And then the banks in turn add the percentage of what they say inflation is on top of that. So that is Dr. Tauheed explained that. So this is why when these people are talking about inflation and cooling down the market, what will happen is the inflation rate will rise, because the conservative economists, and most economists are conservative, Dr. Tawhid is one of the rare ones who is not, want to raise the interest rates even higher. And what that will ultimately do is also increase unemployment. So we have to pay attention to these things, like when the Fed announces, Jerome Powell or whomever, Janet Yellen or whomever announces the Federal Reserve is about to raise the interest rate, you know, 0.25 BP, whatever it is. We have to pay attention to that, because that not only means that if you are in the market to buy a house, your interest rate, the interest rate that's going to be offered to you is going to be, for a mortgage, is going to be higher. But also, we're going to see a change in the job market. So these things directly impact us. And if we don't understand them, we have no way to know what to form a platform around in order to get the policy right, so that we are protected when you know the economists are doing this thing. That's why these things are important. You know,
No
I don't
doubt.
look at them as like intellectual exercises. It's great to know this stuff, but I need to know what to ask people who are operating in the electoral sphere. What do you think about the interest rate? What are you going to do about controlling the interest rate so that Black jobs are not threatened, and that Black people who already have a difficult time in the financial market aren't going to have a harder time in the financial market?
So this is exactly why I like. Well, this is, I should say that, well, obviously that I like my own approach, but what I was really going to say, this is why I've developed for myself my own approach, because when you start, it is specifically in fast moving, whether it's classroom or organizational or in the street or you know, quick conversation, it's very difficult to get to those, to both understand and quickly explain the details that you were just doing very well, for instance, right? So for me, it becomes, as they talk about here, which is what I really appreciate about this discussion with Hamilton and Carrillo, is that they are focused on all of those issues around inflation and unemployment are, as they say here, not natural economic calculus. They're not the result of a natural economic calculus, but rather a choice, and one heavily influenced by the norms and values of those in power to impose that choice.
Mm-hmm.
So, in other words, this idea, so it is sort of presented, particularly in mainstream economics, that unemployment and interest rates and all of these things are just sort of naturally flowing things happening with the economy. They're just happening, and nobody's doing anything. Nobody's deciding anything.
And what this deciding
they are, absolutely, they're doing it on purpose and with a bias that as we'll get to talk about, thankfully, because Adolph Reed has agreed to come on in a couple weeks, that race is important. That part of the decision-making process is involving the norms and values of those in power. Whereas they say here, there are winners and losers in price stability, and we should care about and focus who is gaining. Well, this is the other part. They get into purchasing power anyway, but they're saying that there is, and I'll say it this way, in a very professional, responsible, sophisticated way. What they are saying is that rich white men who have an over influence on the economy and decision making are making decisions that favor them,
right?
And that this has to be accounted for, and why we need to move towards things that I think we should be advocating as basic platform planks and a sort of after party formation of guaranteed incomes, guaranteed employment, well, specific to this conversation, guaranteed income and guaranteed employment among, you know, other things, and a redistribution of the wealth we all create. Yeah, jump in. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I agree. And I mean, the thing is that I think that when we have these conversations, when we look at them from like a 10,000 foot view, you know, people are like, well, this is why we need those across the board policies that you just stated, Jared, right? On the level of correcting these particular economic issues that affect all people. I think that for us, for us radicals, when we understand that race does play a factor in this, even if nobody in these rooms making these decisions are literally saying, we don't care if Black folks die. I mean, even if they're not thinking that, we have to be responsible to have these discussions and tell people that while these policies like guaranteed minimum income, job guarantees and that kind of thing are important and will indeed help all people, we still have to address the aspects of the outflow of this system, of these policies that exist, where racial bias is absolutely always perpetrated by the people who benefit in some way from these policies being made. First example I can think of is real estate markets. Okay, the Federal Reserve sets the interest rates go up because it's better, the banks make more money, and mortgage brokers make more money. That's a 10,000, nobody. Okay, so people are like, okay, yeah, the government fined Wells Fargo for that mud people thing, and that's not happening anymore. If people believe that, okay, fine. But so you've got this policy that deals with that issue, right? At a very high level. But you still have real estate agents who are and finance agents and loan officers who are making decisions based on this very general policy that you cannot hike interest rates for people just because they are Black. This is the interest rate, it's guaranteed, this is all this kind of stuff. You still have to deal with real estate agents, loan officers, bank CEOs, literally people showing folks a house and devaluing the market value of their house because the owner is Black. And then having somebody who is white come in, have another real estate agent come in and value the home hundreds of thousands of dollars higher when a white person appears to be the owner of that house. There are policies that are absolutely race neutral that we need to focus on, that are universal, that need to be advocated for. But the what I call the on the ground implementation of those policies are where we need to have the discussion of what do we do about the racialization of that. And that is always, like, to me, where the disconnect is.
Right. Yeah. As I told, as I see some of the discussion in the chat, and on some level, I appreciate that there is some confidence in me. I don't know that. I think like, as I said before, I think Reed versus Horn would have been the real Foreman, or Ali versus Frazier. But I did reach out to Gerald Horn, and he was not interested in. I invited him to discuss the 1619 Project and race and class with Professor Reed, and he wasn't interested. Yeah, I didn't expect that he would, but I had to at least try, because I think that would have been. Honestly, I think that would have been the ideal. And I think they should. And this is one of the few areas I do disagree with Dr. Horn on. We've talked about this in separately, different for other reasons, over the years, or not really talked about it. I've suggested this to him, but his response is he's not interested in engaging certain disagreements publicly with certain people. And I don't know. I agree. I think he should have said yes, and I think it would have. I think he'd be difficult to defeat. But anyway, just moving on here, at least somewhat quickly before our guest gets here. I did point out here that in this piece that I made a note that what they do here, and this is something that I would maybe want to. I've made a note to maybe consider, and I'll talk to Professor Hamilton about. In the second edition, is that I mentioned it in passing in the first edition, but this is something that maybe should get a little more attention, that there is a kind of, as I made a note here, a professional reference to what is described purchasing, spending, or buying power. and here they have that discussion in that more professional way, as opposed to the myth of buying power that I'm arguing is a weaponized version of this that is targeted specifically and particularly at Black people.
Mm-hmm.
So in general, there is a discussion of what purchasing power is and buying power, and sometimes there are differences in how they're defined. Sometimes they're used as synonyms, but essentially there is, again, just sort of this I don't know, broad, more or less objective economic analytical, how much can somebody or some company or some nation spend, and how much value, or what value is held by the money they have or the currency they're using or whatever. But that is very different than what is done as it's applied and thrown at Black people, and to be said, you do have this power and you are ignorantly misusing it. And you could be free if as Max Kaiser said, you invested in Bitcoin in 2011, that kind of stuff. But then they continue on here. I mean, they remind us of where Dr. King was at the end of his life, where Coretta had picked up in her lifetime this argument that we need federal intervention, that we need policy that redistributes wealth. And then they talk about the neoliberal movement that was fueled by a reaction against gains in the civil rights movement and was used to rebrand and reframe the discussion away from all of that. So as they say here, that the movement was also fueled by a rhetorical elegance in its language. That is the neoliberal movement, where words like freedom, choice, and a specific notion of rights, not economic rights of people, but the economic rights of property. This rhetoric of property rights was devoid of an honest reckoning with an immoral practice by which that property had come to be distributed in the first place. Again, resonates very well with my argument about buying power that I don't really say explicitly. That is, there is a portion of this accumulation of wealth that white people and European powers have gone through that they deny to us. That is a military conquest and an assumption of control of all the land and the productive capabilities that creates the wealth that led to them having all of it, including the property, etc. Then words like freedom and choice and rights are applied to the rights, again, of property and the rights of quote unquote free markets and capital, but not of people. And the same thing that has been done with the, in a microcosm with the buying power argument, where power is not defined as economic or political, or I'm sorry, not as political or in the ways of Huey Newton, the ability to define phenomena and have it act in a desired manner. No, power is reduced to the ability to consume other people's products and enrich them. Which again is, I think, an important point being made in this discussion here about it's not just about the specifics and the data as it relates to economic inequality, but how are these discussions framed so that we can't get to what needs to be done if change is actually to occur. So even he says here, that is Derek Hamilton, the Fed has a great deal of power with respect to growth and distribution, directing rates of borrowing and investment capacity, injecting liquidity into the economy, and dictating the distributional rules and allotment of how and where that investment and liquidity will take place. In particular, the Fed positions banks in a privileged way, and likewise has a great deal of sway over the terms in which finance can engage with American people. So again, this is very different from, you all have to get your money right. You all don't do what the Jews and the Asians do. You all do, I mean, this is where I think we need to get. And I honestly only think we can get to it in some sort of alternative electoral formation, or political formation. So and then Jackie, I'll stop here and let you jump back in. But I want to say one more thing about to clarify that point, because this is going to come up on Monday with Diedrich and Netfa. When I say political power, I'm intentionally being vague, particularly in the context of the buying power book, because I'm not meaning political power means we have to vote for a Democrat and hope that they win, and that means we have power if Biden is in office. That's not what I mean. Political power means control over the policies that do all of this. that define where property is, what it is, who has it, how wealth is created, who gets it. And that's what I'm saying we need to be focused on. So when I'm saying engage the political process, I'm saying we need to do it differently if that is ever going to turn into something that is akin to what I define as political power. I think there is this confusion, and I even think my man Deidre kind of gets into it a little bit with the Stokely reference, the Kwame Ture reference, that political power means voting for Democrats or voting for people within this already established system as it currently exists. Anyway. So,
yeah, I mean, I look at the whole, you know, when you talked about the words that the neoliberal policies use very frequently. This is why policies like school choice is a neoliberal project, and so many Democrats support it, right? And it's a good thing.
Or right to work.
Or right to like work, that, yeah. and Democrats won't come out and say, well, they're anti-union, but they support right to work, which is an anti-union, you know, thing, and it's an anti-worker thing, and you know, freedom, using freedom. The decision for the Democratic Party to use this kind of framing in this. In their neoliberal policies comes from the Democratic Leadership Council. I think specifically when we're talking about policy now, not just talking about the way white politicians think, but we're talking about policy, an intentional framing strategy of how to get certain things done that they wanted to do. So the Democratic Leadership Council was like, hey, we don't like that all of these so-called moderate Republicans or conservative Democrats or whatever they called those white people who voted for Reagan because they didn't like Clinton. We didn't like that we lost a bunch of folks to the Reagan Republican Party.
Or Carter. They voted for Reagan because they didn't like Carter.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because they didn't like Carter. We don't like
they give us Clinton.
Right. So the Democratic Leadership Council came up with this thing called third way politics, where it's not liberal, it's not conservative, it's a third way. And it included all of these cute little phrases about freedom and rights, and always rights in the context of property, exactly as you said, Jared, never in the context of the rights of human beings, you know, choice, and which talks about the choice of the market, not yours, if you have a large enough market share to be able to afford to, you know what I mean? So they did this intentionally, framing their policies in the context of the founding fathers, right? The originalists in the Constitution, the very conservative, exclusive, rich, landowning, white male perspective, with the intentional purpose, with the express purpose of winning back all of those Democrats who switched over to the Republican Party after Carter, because they wanted to win those people back. So this is why we have Democrats who continue to prop up school choice, property rights, and that type of thing. They appeal to the founding father syndrome, because they know they wanted all of those white voters who jumped ship after the Carter administration. So when people say, and this is Democrats, and they still do, this is Democratic policies are still this way. This is how Clinton became a president. Obama continued, even though the Democratic Leadership Council does not officially exist anymore. And Biden is the exact same way. Every Democrat in Congress pretty much is the exact same way. So when people tell me that I, as an African person who the founding fathers never intended to have any rights, tell me that I need to vote for the Democrats because they are better than the Republicans, when I know doggone well that the Democrats have intentionally adopted the language and the spirit of the conservative framing of this country to shape policies to attract rich white male voters back to the Democratic Party, I don't see how that makes any kind of sense. And when we see, when we look at articles like this, and very learned people are explaining exactly what the Democrats do to continue to leave Black folks out of this equation, I don't understand how we continue to make the argument that voting for the Democrats as the better party is actually it's logical. It's not, because the
Yeah, no.
Democrats have intentionally reshaped themselves to look and act exactly like the Republican Party to attract so-called moderate Republicans, but with kente cloth and a rainbow flag. That's really,
So this is why, I mean, so just very quickly, just to wrap myself up, and of course we'll continue talking about all of this. It's not, just a pause, but what they're ultimately advocating here is similar to and even to answer the question to the extent I understood it from Sounds of Saying Elsewhere, what I'm saying is that however we engage, I don't know exactly what to do. I'm saying however, but I am saying that the after party concept for me is that however we engage a party, a system, a process, whatever, it has to be in a pre-organized, with certain political standards set and established way, so that when as they say here, that we that the economy is a concept, and in practice is not a concept devoid of politics, power, and racial and other social identity hierarchies. It's never strictly the result of unfettered agents guided by their free will and transactional relationships. Social hierarchies of power have always mattered. And we are naive if we don't recognize how that every policy in the U.S. is racialized. And the impact of this racialization is by no means limited to Black people. So as they say here, and this is sort of my point even about the electoral process, that even if we want to engage it, even if we want to first build as nationalists, I think we do have to recognize that in terms of how we engage electoral processes. Because again, a lot of nationalists, and this is, a lot of people within our community are very pro-Black, very Pan-Africanist, very straight up on that, but then go nowhere else but to the Democratic Party when it's time to vote, or they don't vote at all. So I'm simply saying this would be my encouragement, that we build this sort of alternative and say, we know this is not the end of the solution. We know that not everything facing African people is satisfied by voting in this way, but this is I think a way of building group cohesion, of radically politicizing the vote, pun intended, and building sort of politically educated platform planks or bright lines, as Glenn Ford has said historically, that we can work with. That are far beyond, they're not Trump, and then we need to do this to stop the rise of a fascist. So they do talk about here in terms of federal job guarantees, developing a care economy, which to me just sounds like socialism, but that's, whatever. And then bringing in a lot of the arguments that had been brought in Black and brown and even white radical movements historically, regarding job guarantees, which is described here, was crystallized the country's first, arguably strongest Latino African-American legislative alliance, things like that. So in other words, Black and brown people are going to vote together to vote for Biden. Why we need to radicalize that and say Black and brown people need to vote together for their actual self-interests. Anyway, and get around the capture class, which I've talked about differently. The political apparatus is captured by those who rule, and so on and so forth. So we'll come back to that. But one other thing quickly that I wanted to bring up in this context is, because I have been following this, Jackie. I know you have been following this. And these are the videos I was going to play that we'll skip for today. But Status Quo has been getting a lot of the updates on what's been happening with the Movement for a People's Party, which is something I've been just paying attention to from a distance, as something not necessarily to join or advocate for, but to either support as part of an after party collective, or just to see. And Nick Brana, the leader of this, has been apparently under investigation for alleged sexual harassment. And they have been removing people on the board and elsewhere who have been raising this as a concern within the Movement People's Party. This is something that has been championed by, all the big wigs, so-called, of the left and alternative space, white predominantly, but of course they brought in Brianna Joy Gray a little bit. I think they brought in Cornel West a little bit. They brought in, I think Brianna was involved with this, supporting this anyway. But I even met Nick briefly last summer, I went and checked them out when they had an action here in Maryland, outside of one of the Maryland senators' houses. I went and checked out to see what was what. And I was, it was whatever, but anyway, I was never certainly close enough to know about any of this. Renee Johnston, a sister who is involved with this, has been one of the more outspoken voices in talking about what's been going on. And so while I don't want to disparage or discourage third-party development in general, I don't want to discourage us from engaging these folks in terms of an after-party sort of approach to electoral politics. I just thought this was interesting. So anyway, Jackie, I think you had some, I don't know, experience with the party or following them a little bit, or,
Yeah, yeah, these folks came out of, the post, I guess I'm calling the post Bernie wave. And
right.
I knew about all of the people who actually kind of founded the whatever it was before it became, Nick Brana's thing. It was funny because there were early, very intense discussions, debates that I had with some of these folks who I do not talk to now, or who they do not talk to me now, over cryptocurrency, because folks were convinced that cryptocurrency was the answer to it, was the revolution, and we need to get on it. And as I raised concerns about it then, I was, told all kinds of things, worse than ill-informed, quite honestly, that I wasn't this and I wasn't that. And these were all, mostly white folks, with the exception of one or two. So my criticism of a lot of the post-Sanders political engagement from a lot of folks who have not been involved and interested in politics until Sanders came along is that they were and they had been at that point. A lot of those people were very they had a messianic view of Sanders. They had I think an immature view of politics, and they had a very exclusionary view of what they saw their movements as, meaning if you didn't agree with what Sanders said and what he did, and then you were, the enemy. It was all around Sanders, and it really wasn't around grassroots and the people and that kind of thing. So as I saw these people, and this is why this is my moment of petty early in the morning. This is why I don't hold a lot of weight when some folks that I know came from this movement come to me talking about a certain Black intellectual said race doesn't matter. Like, you didn't even read his book. You didn't know who the hell he was until he came. Shut up. So, okay. So these are folks who, when Black folks were supporting Sanders, were like, look, Sanders is great. That's wonderful. But there's this issue of race that we have to deal with. And I saw a lot of this around and experienced a lot of it when people would come, invite me and Abdus to speak in the early days after, the Sanders movement. And I would bring this issue up. Yeah, it's great that you guys are doing this, but what are you doing about the issue of racism? What are you going to do about, racism in healthcare, medicine, education, all that kind of stuff? So the MPP, I think the thing that turned me off about them was that they were, and I understand there is a certain amount of theater that is necessary, like in politics, right? I think that's what all people need to get, that there is a certain amount of posturing that needs to be done in politics to get people's attention, because that's just how we are in this country. You can't give people facts. You got to put on a show because we're that misinformed. But I saw too much of that, where I thought that Brana and the MPP were building the MPP not on the calls and the needs of the people and the discussion around what was really needed, but there was a lot of theater, like, delivering a big old petition to Bernie Sanders at his office when they knew damn well he wasn't there, and then somebody else bringing a cake and them singing happy birthday. So, it all seemed very personality focused as opposed to policy focused to me. And that was my main criticism, aside from the whole crypto thing and these, white folks telling Black people who know better that cryptocurrency is not going to save you. It's sure not going to save us. So it was all very personality focused and very, very myopic in terms of, what their perspective on politics was. So it's not a surprise that this kind of thing happened, because there's not a lot there's not a lot of accountability in spaces like that, where once you criticize people for their strategy, their policies, then you get attacked and you become the enemy. And that's why we organize the way we do, because we can't do that.
Right on. Yeah. Well, anyway, we will continue this. Obviously, this is an ongoing conversation, and something that will continue to be relevant, fortunately or not, going forward. But we do have a guest that I'm very excited to get to, who is ready to go. So I want to take a quick transition break, but very quickly, remember that at 10 o'clock, the special members only, we're going to jump over and have our collective watching of Boyce Watkins' latest, which should be a lot of fun. Then, of course, at 11 o'clock, Dhoruba Bin Wahad, Ajamu Baraka, Kalanji Changa, Riot Starter TV, getting into it. So I know we're all very excited about that. But speaking of even in that tradition, quick break. We'll be right back. Let me set this up a little bit better. Back in a second. Don't go. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. All right, everybody. So I back here at I Mix What I Like. I'm very excited about this because for a long time, I never got a chance to meet the brother in person. And I only vaguely think I may have been live at an event where he was maybe once. But as any of us who grew up, coming up of a certain age and a political awareness in the 80s and 90s, those of us who listened to cassette lecture tapes, delivering pizzas and doing our work or whatever, watched the old VHS tapes, those of us who came of age learning about political prisoners and Pan-Africanism during this time, and who would have been at all interested in the African role in internationalist radical politics and history, any one of us would have been made familiar or become aware of Bay Brath. And even when, if some of us might remember, even when shows like Democracy Now! were more connected to their origins and roots, you would see him there as well from time to time. For those of us who watched and came of age watching the CIA whistleblower John Stockwell, one of the big whistleblowers that came out in our generation. We saw Bay Brath in dialogue with him. We saw Bay Brath in dialogue with Dhoruba and everybody else. This was a giant of a figure. So when I was able to get in touch with Cinque Brath, our next guest of the Bay Brath Foundation, I was very excited to do so. So we'll bring Brother Cinque up now, and welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. It is an honor to have you. Good morning.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. So as we close out Black History Month, especially.
Well,
but we all know. Also, pleasure for you to be here with you too, Jackie.
The honor is mine, and I'm really just going to sit here and mute myself and listen. That's all I'm going to do. Thank you.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. But as Alambe would have, and Alfred would have said, that like there is no beginning and end to Black history. So right. so like there is no. So can we just start with some of the basics? And admittedly, sure. I want to do this again. So I don't want this to be our first time doing this, and I want to be more prepared. I was late in catching up to getting us arranged, and honestly, just full disclosure, I would have loved to have more clips ready so we could hear, and all that. But YouTube for now, Alambe is everywhere. But who is Alambe Brath, and what is his legacy to this day?
Well, the funny thing about it, that is so hard to say because he has worn so many hats and he has done so many things he's been involved with. Some people know him for his work with political prisoners. That's really how they know him. And part of that working with political prisoners is they might have been an inmate because he used to go to the island or into the prisons and speak to prisoners. He was heavily involved with Adam Abdul Hakim, Larry Davis case, consulting and advising him, saying that, no, Larry Davis, you picked this young man up at this early age. He's a political prisoner, making a case for that. And, one of the things he would use is the Patricia Mumba Coalition forums. The Patricia Mumba Coalition forums in Harlem ran for a very long time on Friday nights. And not only they did so many things. It was African internationalists. We had people like Thomas Sankara come there right before he was killed. We had a lot of heads of state come there, pick their bones there. We had community events. Even when there were disagreements between people who are Black nationalists and people who are in the Nation of Islam over certain things. So the Patricia Mumba Coalition, was founded in 1975 by Alambe Brath and Irvin Davis primarily. And they started it off there, Their main goal really was not just the Congo, but for African independence movements. We start talking about ANC in South Africa, supporting SWAPO in Namibia, Frelimo in Mozambique, ZANU in Zimbabwe. So it's a lot going on. You know what I mean? At the Harriet Tubman School and what the Patricia Mumba Coalition was doing. But even prior to that, one of the first and mega events that Alambe was involved in was the African Jazz Art Society and Studio, which started in 1956. And hopefully this year, it should have happened already, there will be a street naming in honor of where that organization was founded at in the Bronx, in the South Bronx, on 751 Kelly Street, in the basement of my grandparents' house later on this year. It should have really already happened. Kind of ticked off about that, but it's okay. And what people don't know though about that early foray is they actually started off as Jazz Art Society, because my father, he was a creative. He was a designer. He was he was an artist. He was a creative. So when people think about his work on Like It Is and what he was doing on Like It Is, it would say graphic engineer, consultant. He was a consultant in the capacity when you bring in on people like Sam Njomo, first president of Namibia. You bring in people like Robert Mugabe. You bring in Maurice Bishop, Grenada. These personalities on. That was what he was doing.
I got to jump in here. I'm sorry. Sure. So this is I did not know this. I knew of him obviously being a guest on Like It Is with Gil Noble. Rest in peace to Gil Noble. And people got to understand. I got to get my man Todd on here to really get into. He's the supreme historian on that, and had me. My one meeting with Gil Noble was because of Todd. I got to shout out respect. I'll respect do that. But. I did not know Alambe. So real quick, Alambe was your father.
Yes, I have 6 siblings. I have 5 brothers and a sister. I'm in the middle, 3 older, 3 younger.
Right on.
Yeah, so I was I was the one though who did the most traveling with my father. the most work with my father, traveled with him abroad internationally, and more so took the most interest in the sort of work that he was doing, and trying to keep all the documentation of these events, in line with what he didn't complete or what he didn't do. But yeah, he was at, in fact, and there's a book that's edited by Herb Boyd. But it's just some of the essays. Bernard White, former general manager of WBAI, where Ilambe had the radio show Africa Kaleidoscope for many years. He tells the story about Bernard said he was there when the State Department came in and told ABC that my father couldn't work on Like It Is anymore and with Gil Noble. And so Bernard White goes in. That part, it's about a 4-page intro, and he tells what happened when the State Department came in and said this can't be done anymore. This relationship.
So that's where I was going.
Stop.
So Ilambe he was working officially with the Gil Nobles.
Oh yeah, no, he worked it Like It Is, man, for many years.
And that's how he helped round out some of that guest list.
Yeah, and in fact,
that guest list, boy.
Yeah, all of those international guests. Gil will tell you himself. Gil was like that. He didn't know these people. He didn't know these heads of state. He didn't know these leaders. He did not have that reach. He always says that's Bay Brath. Gil makes no bones about that sort of thing. That's how that was happening.
Somehow I didn't know that. And then the State Department came in and said that this can't happen.
Yeah, but the State Department really also came up because they were shooting a program about Zionism and the Palestinian situation. And what happened was there was some some cameramen who were Jewish, of the Jewish faith, and they was watching this because it was pre-recorded, it wasn't live. They got on the phone and they started calling people and like saying like no, this show cannot get out on these airways. Because if you remember at that time, Jared, New York City did not have TV was different. You did not have 100, 300 channels.
That's right.
You went out on ABC. Like It Is, ABC, CBS, NBC. Those were the main 3 networks. So you sort of had like a captive audience. You might have had a little bit of Channel 5. They weren't called Fox then, I believe. It was, I forget, but Channel 9 or an 11 and stuff. But the major networks were basically 3, ABC, NBC, and CBS. And so Like It Is, which played out in the tri-state area, that was a Black
crazy.
Public Affairs show. That was, where everything.
And to think of it on ABC is crazy.
Watching some of this with my mom, like we could support it. We could pick it up sometimes. We were in DC, and she get all excited. I was like, with my mom, like watching, and she's telling me, and I remember this person, her telling me he's talking to someone from Africa, and my mom would be like, we're from Africa, and I'm like 5, and I'm like, okay. I don't know what. Yeah, so that's just like really, really cool to remember this, and just wild.
I had to get it on. I never remember seeing it live. I never remember seeing Like It Is within like a normal time frame of the original broadcast. I only ever saw them on VHS tapes that I would get at Everyone's Place in Baltimore. Shout out to Everyone's Place. Or they would put the audio on cassettes. And not just Everyone's Place, shout out to them, but also like Pyramid Books, and that used to be in Georgia Avenue in DC, and the Blue Nile used to have tapes in there, but they would, and it would be like Gil Noble Like It Is tapes. So that was the only way I got to interact. And especially looking back, I'm like, damn, that was on ABC. It's crazy to think that like now it would be some hot but still probably marginalized YouTube show right now or something.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Like, you couldn't.
Anyway.
Yeah. they were not a lot. You didn't have the variety of thought and perspectives back then that you have now. But like you say, even now, you might have a large audience, but it might be only internet, I mean,
So
even radio was different, though.
oh no,
you
no question.
mentioned Democracy Now, and Amy Goodman. She was in her infancy. And if you get her, I think it's the book Respect to the Rulers. She says that how she learned radio was through Samori Marksman, WBAI, and Elan Bay Brath.
She says that, and then she even goes on to say all of the. She's like gives a shout out to like the broader Pan Africanist community.
Yeah.
She uses that phrase or something to that, like in the book.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, so like some of us who remember where that show started, it is. I can't listen or watch anymore. But it is. I mean, it was a whole. Anyway, it's crazy.
Right.
But
I know it's changed for sure.
But I did want you to like if we could, like you mentioned your a little bit of the background of your father's, like how did your father get to be, like where did his politics come from? Where does your family come from? Like where does this start?
Well, my father's side come from Barbados, Christchurch and Black Rock. Although my father was born in Brooklyn, and his younger brothers, he actually has another brother who
did the State Department get us again? I think the State Department got involved again.
The man got us again.
They got us again. We were just about to get cooking. Hold on, we'll get him back on here. We should have known that. But it is kind of true. Oh no, you've got to. Everyone's Place, by the way, it is. In all sincerity, it's my favorite bookstore ever. It is. I grew up in that bookstore, politically. I mean, and I used to. You want to talk about contradictions? I mean, one of my favorite was because I used to deliver pizzas here in Howard County, and I would either before my shift or after go into Baltimore. Swing through, some who will know this will recognize, swing through North Carey Street real quick and stop through and pick up a little something, and then swing around over to Pennsylvania Avenue and over to Everyone's Place and pick up my books, lecture tapes. They had the best bean pies in that joint. You could get your oils, little jewelry if you needed something, like it was like, and then it used to be in the back wall upstairs, just a wall of cassettes. And then eventually,
man.
So I stayed on them, and that's how I was introduced to all of this. I for years I heard James Turner on audio tapes for years before I ended up at Africana. I heard Elambe usually playing like an introductory role, like on the Patricia Mumba Coalition tapes. Like he would be introducing, and like he hosted, and in fact, Cinque is back.
Yeah,
Elambe hosted the Daruba Ben Wahad, John Henry Clark, and Amiri Baraka debate on Spike Lee's Malcolm X.
Oh my!
That came out before the movie came out. They debated it because they had read some of the scripts. Amiri had seen it, and he introduced that joint, and that was so. Anyway, my point is Please continue.
It was an article. He said, this can't be another Spike Lee joint. That was the criticism of it. Yeah, because some of the stuff that Spike initially had in there was out of this world, so to speak.
It was crazy. And they said it was on that they talked about Warner Brothers at the time was saying, we're going to turn Malcolm X into a brand like The Simpsons and Batman.
Oh my God.
And I was like, even then, I was like, no, that can't be right. That doesn't even make any sense.
My God.
Anyway. Capitalism, they can commercialize anybody or anything. That's one thing I realized. I mean, anything they can do it. They've got the money, and people are dumbed down enough that they'll go for it. Especially if you keep pushing it, So I don't even.
So
No, I
I'm
don't
sorry,
know
go ahead,
where I don't know where my connection fizzled out. It just all of a sudden, boop.
You were just talking about
Yeah.
we said the State Department got you again.
Yeah.
We were saying you were just starting to talk
You had
about
been renditioned, so we were just like,
sometimes it didn't. These things. The first thing I did think was conspiracy. I'm not gonna lie. Like, why did this happen? I've done things, but why? If I'm talking about something that's not international, if I'm just dealing with a lighter aspect of history, that never happens. As soon as I go into something international, that's when the problem starts.
see, it's not just me.
So-
I'm not the only one who thinks that.
No,
Yeah.
just because you paranoid doesn't mean it's not happening.
Exactly.
So
Because doesn't, as they said, just because I'm paranoid, but doesn't mean it's not out to get you.
So, but you were talking about your father and his brothers and coming out of Barbados, because I was trying to get a little bit, because I'm just curious, like, how did I never
because really he got exposure very early on. We have a famous first cousin named Clennell Wickham. He was a socialist and he was the editor at the Herald newspaper in Barbados. So he would often write these open editorials and encouraging the masses to rise up against the plantation class. So he was a subject of conversation at many dinner table with my father growing up, with my grandparents and such. So he was getting exposed very early on, to outside of the box thinking, or why Clennell Wickham was all about these workers' rights and these Black people controlling their production in Barbados. But the thing is, he wasn't just any. He was the newspaper editor, of the Herald. Eventually he was kicked out of Barbados, and he sort of died in exile. Although, and that's the family story we understand, although the new book that the University of Mississippi did about my father, they contradict that, so to speak. They're saying that the paper had more financial troubles. There's a book that the University of Mississippi Press did. It's called The Artistic Activism of Bay Brath. And this is and this is in his early days. This is this is how Elambe first comes on the scene and gets introduced to the world. So
you feel like the book did a good job?
They did a good job overall.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
Okay,
There's certain few minor things in there that I don't think that they represent it in the best way or in the best understanding. But overall, yes, they did a very thorough. Very thorough, and they have looked at my father's early life like never. Like when I look at here, they recovered certain artwork and certain things. Like they were doing their work, because I remember I got a call about news clippings from early 1960s about an arrest. What happened there when they went to the Philadelphia Police Department, that they had no record of Elambe being arrested and stuff. So they were going and doing their work. They were going back into Barbados, they were going in. But outside of Clennell Wickham's early influence on my father being talked about, there was a brother in 1948. He introduced my father and my uncle Kwame to some what people might call radical sort of teacher. His Christian name was Leslie Scott, and for some reason right now I am drawing a blank on what his name was. But he first got them into politics, even though they were in the arts and they were creators. He was someone who danced. He was Porgy and Bess. He sung. He was in the arts world. And they started taking some classes with him about when the Arab, Palestinian, and Israeli war jumped off, about who was right and all of this sort of thing. So he was their sort of like first sort of mentor guy, and he was someone who, he quote unquote, I hate to use this term, was basically blackballed because he had changed his name to from Leslie Scott to for some reason, again, I can't recall his name right now, but if anybody has like Instagram, if they go to at Ajazz 1956, AJASS 1956, there's a little something about him, and he was very political, and he was having these classes with them and exposing them in 1940s, you know. So very early on, they had this sort of exposure, at least, and my father, you know, it was an extension of things he had exposed to very early on. And, you know, even made for my father to be different, because there was a time early on with certain giants in the Black community, they were not feeling Fidel, you know, because they were not really feeling socialism and all these sort of things. And my father was like, nah, Fidel is the man, you know. You know, he was embracing Fidel at that time, even, you know, in a number of communities when, you know, 1959 Bay of Pigs happened, because again, Cleno Wickham, if anyone wants to do a search or find out about him, was the first cousin, and my father already had this sort of exposure to you know, from a family member in that sort of history. So he was already exposed early on, and sort of politicized early on, also with another gentleman. Again, I was ashamed I can't remember Leslie Scott's name. I can only remember his Christian name right now. Usually it's the other way around.
Right. But first of all, like I said, man, I'm very glad to have you on, and I want to just say publicly that this doesn't have to be the last time, and I want, you know, this show and this platform to be available to you and your work, and anytime you want to do something or share something, or we can talk about your father's work. I mean, I'm happy to do that, because I mean, you know, ever since I reached out to you whenever it was ago on Instagram, I was like, first of all, I remember when I saw a Bay Brath Foundation on Instagram, I was like, what? I was like amped. I was like, hell yeah. I was like, I wasn't even thinking of him in that space like that, right? You know, so it was
well, it's, you know, Jared, it's a lot of work that, you know, we have to do. I'm also on a board for UPAMA, you know, and one of the goals is for us to, all of those over the last 50 years. So the Bay Brath Foundation has Africa Kaleidoscope, you know, all of those internationalist guests, especially African and Caribbean heads of state, all of those interviews, all of that exposure. We want to digitize that, make that available. A lot of times it's like reinventing the wheel. These leaders have spoken. They've said what was happening in their country. Wow. You know, so we want to make that available, but not just for the Patricia Mumba Coalition events. We're talking about Africa Kaleidoscope events. So that's what the Bay Brath Foundation have been working on in digitization. But UPAMA, which I'm also a board member, is looking for the New York tri-state area. All of these events, from Dr. Clark speaking, all of these Samori Marksman, you know, but all of the significant events, you know, digitizing them, because as you mentioned earlier, Jared, a lot of this stuff is on VHS tapes, audio cassette tapes. That's not a palatable format for what our young people are doing today and what's happening today.
It's not even possible anymore. Like it's you can't even find a CD player or a cassette player anymore without going through a lot of work. And like my students have literally never seen one. Like, they don't even know what it is. Like I put up a picture of a cassette, just like, have you ever seen a cassette? Like, I just like, you know, like, so, but getting a tape player and then actually wanting to go, and then honestly, why should they? Like, it's a digital era. We need to be click, and then let's get it. So, and my own library has been depleted over the years, which was pretty thick at one point. So I would love, and if we can help with any of that, please.
I'll shoot the link for also UPAMA also to you later, but and the work that we're doing with UPAMA. But you know, one of the things is I had already even the flyers of themselves are treasures. When you start seeing the formats about, you know, the Giuliani when he was first coming to power, you know, and all of this stuff on political prisoners, some who are no longer here. academic fights with people like Tony Martin at Wesleyan College over him being labeled an anti-Semite, the things with Leonard Jeffries, all of these, I mean, video and audio of this is very important, you know what I mean? That stuff not be lost. And, you know, one of the things I realized about how important it was, take Michigan State University. We're in New York. Michigan State University has what they call the African Activist Archive, where they have all of this stuff about Elam Bey even we didn't have, dating back to the 60s and early 70s, you know, stuff in Philadelphia. You know, we recently lost one, the brother who was the to the UN from Namibia, who lived in Harlem. Oh gosh, what is wrong with my memory today? Oh, we lost him about 3 years ago. Again, I'm drawing a blank. But an example, they had flyers where him and my father were in Philadelphia, along with some other people that we didn't even know existed. And I'm like, why? And Michigan State University hosts this whole African Activist Archives, and we're here in New York, and they have all these things. And then you see stuff, private collection of this person, the flyers and the information from this outside of our community. Now, I've met the guy who does it. Nice guy, Richard Knight, white guy, who's Michigan State. You know, they sponsor him to be here in Harlem and take care of that. Cool dude. But, you know, just to think that academic places outside of here are compiling and keeping this sort of stuff, you know, suggest about the importance of it, and you know that other people are paying attention and see the value of it. So the foundation, you know, we know we got a lot of work to do, and you know we have a big announcement that's going to be coming out that I can't lean into yet. But it's gonna be a fact. No, but listen, Jimmy, wait a minute. I'm gonna give you an hint. No, but it's gonna be changing. It's gonna be dealing with it's gonna be changing the face of Black college athletics. There's gonna really happen within the next 3 months. That I can't say which country and which HBCUs we're working in conjunction with, but it's right there. We halfway done.
Well, it can't be Morgan State because I haven't been.
It's not. Yeah, nah. It's not Morgan State. It's not
anything
that
happens at Morgan State. I'm invited. So
yeah.
I'm just playing.
It's not Morgan State.
Okay. Well, okay.
Debate.
Yeah.
I took it. Yes.
I know, right? It's like three. No. You know, because you know your Aggies comrade is shouting you out. Leah Boggs was a few years behind you, I think she said it.
Yes, and she's unfortunately she's right on what university she said. I'm not gonna say it, but she's right. It does involve that university. so I'll just say that.
Okay. Just quickly, just a quick response. Yeah, I see some of the chat. I know that cassettes and vinyl are making a comeback, but honestly, they're not making a comeback in many of the Black communities that show up in my classroom. That's really where I'm starting in terms of who I'm thinking about. These kids they're not checking for vinyl. They're not in those certain circles with certain, you know, whatever. They're not in those circles. So they're
definitely not looking for these lecture tapes.
And they're not right. They're not and right. And the vinyl community is not looking. So I would, but anyway. So the digitization project is very much needed.
And not only that, I mean, even securing images, as people probably Google use, a lot of my Uncle Kwame's, a lot of his photographs right now are they're out there, you know, with celebrities, especially ever since Rihanna had my uncle's photographs on her launch for her label. And she had pictures of my mother. She had pictures of my father when she launched Fenty. Ever since then, they've really taken off in the space of getting very popular in terms of nostalgia of Ajaz bringing forth the Black is Beautiful movement in the 60s. People, there is a lot of revisiting of that, because as we and this book starts to do a little bit of that, speaking about the Grandassa model, speaking about Ilambe first coming onto the scene. He was actually first a satirist and columnist, you know, in the vein of Aaron Magruder, way before Aaron Magruder.
Oh,
you know?
wow, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
The artwork and the cartoons. There was, along with the Amsterdam News at the time, there was another black paper called the Citizen Call that he used to write for. And his actual columns used to appear on the front page of there. It was Citizen Call was started up by a former black Tuskegee airman. And he had a column with Congressman Carter and Beatnik Jackson. And in this book that the universe is edited by and compiled by Thomas Aiello. Again, he did a lot of work on this, and he he went back, he found a lot of the old strips, brought those in. He also, I mean, the only thing he probably misses about the early artistic work is that Ilambe's work with the inventor of Tarzan, because Tom Feelings, who some people may or may not know about, is one of our great black creators, artists. And Tom Feelings was the first person to integrate the School of Visual Arts. Ilambe was the second. But they already had a black person in the 50s. They Ilambe wasn't supposed to be able to get in. But the creator of Tarzan had a very liberal wife who was like his writing style, his art is too unique, too magnificent. You have to make sure that this sort of thing gets broken. She made sure that he got into School of Visual Arts. And the School of Visual Arts is very important to his development, because not only did they hone his creative and artistic talents, but what they did was it allowed him to also study how the art should be marketed, how you reach people. It also gave the business mind, because a lot of what, when you start talking about the Black is Beautiful movement, or the formation of the genesis of the Black arts movement, we really have to push the timeline back, because I just saw something by Henry Louis Gates the other day talking about the Black is Beautiful movement, talking and basically saying it grew out of the Black Power movement, and that's not accurate. The Black is Beautiful movement grew out of the Black arts movement, because African Jazz Art Society and Studio, AJAZ, was the first. Okay, even
we already know that Henry Louis Gates just stays, like
all
so,
you had to say was Henry Louis.
You got me getting hyped. Like get him out of here.
You even finished his name. It was like, nah.
But yeah, no. So I mean, both the head or the founder of, he was the head of the School of Visual Arts, but he was also the first illustrator of Tarzan. His name was Bern Hogarth. He did a whole lot of things, but he was the top guy. And after my father came in, a whole bunch of other members from AJAZ, Chris Asmendese Hall, my Uncle Kwame, and a few other people all started coming into that school. But initially, they were like, oh, we got one Black artist, we got one Black creative guy, we don't need anymore. But many people like Herb Boy, they'll talk about my father and Malcolm X meeting to their early meetings, or things that Malcolm X had told to my father. But a lot of times in the essay book, people could read how the first time when my father went over to meet Malcolm, that he wasn't initially allowed in. He was not so much allowed in. He had to wait, because this book here, right, is basically came out of another book called Color Us Colored that my father did in 1963. Now, Color Us Colored really pillared and satirized most of the Black leadership of that time. It went hard at them. It was like a viral book. upset a lot of people. So what happened really was that the Supreme Court, not the Supreme, Thurgood Marshall was succeeded at the NAACP by a Jewish attorney. Right now, his name eludes me also. But about 4 years ago, he passed in his 90s. And when his stuff went up, he had a collection of Color Us Colored in his personal collection. So when it went on eBay, it started people like, oh, who is this? You know, at that time, my father was just known as Cecil Bay Brath, you know. So a lot of time people didn't put Cecil Brathwaite and Elambe Brath as the same person, you know. Even I think this, can you see this shirt here? Can you see what this is at the top?
Little.
Okay, this is
that
no, that's Elambe. That's Elambe and Percy Sutton. Percy Sutton, who owner of the Apollo Theater. This is the corner of 125th Street. It used to say, this is when they put up the four corners to say African Liberation Square. Okay, because at that time, my father, that's what, you know, when he was moving away from AJAZ and moving to Patricia Mumba Coalition thing, African independence, anti-colonialism, that was what was on his mind. That was the big deal. So those four corners from the Harlem State Office building where all our politicians going, right on 25th Street. Right now it says African Square, but if you could see this original, that's why.
I'm sorry.
Wow.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at you were talking about Jack Greenberg at the NAACP.
That's we go. Here we go, Jared. Yeah. Jack Greenberg, right, when he passed.
Yeah.
You know, his went up, and then all the people like, what is this book? And it selling for a high price. And it was like, oh, this was in that time, this was the collector's book. Everybody got roasted in here, or everybody got, you know, what we call made fun of, or their politics, you know, analyzed from this sort of thing. So that's really was the impetus that I believe for this book, because it sort of revived. Like, to get that book now, if you go to the library, it's basically what we call under like a lock and key. You can get access to Color Us Colored, but somebody, New York Public Library, they're going to be still, you go in a room, it's a classic, and you turn the pages and they're right there. You can't take it out. You can't take it with you to a desk. It's what they do when they have these sort of works that are classics and rare. They don't allow other people to get it. So of course we have, and what they did, that's a whole different other story, how it came into, they actually, our foundation was about to re-put out Color Us Colored and begin to look at this before the University of Mississippi Press. But I got a letter saying it has all to do with trademarks. It's a longer story, and it has to do with trademarks and copyright laws that have changed over time. And I just say to people, better secure your stuff depending on when it came out, because other people will own your parents or grandparents' creative or literary works. So Jack Greenberg, he had it in his collection, and Color Us Colored. But this is more than Color Us Colored. There we go. That's it right there. American, which really, I mean, I think Color Us Colored personally, today, if people see it, it would be shocking to the senses. You know, it would be like hard for some people, especially how it deals with issues of Black celebrity and Black and white, you know, beefs that people don't even know were taking place or they were happening, you know, were being played out, and all sorts of politics with that.
You mentioned Black celebrity, and we don't, because I know we're having to head towards a close here in a few minutes. So on what is just the first of what I'm going to just call into being many more future conversations with you and your crew. But speaking of Black celebrity, I mean, you've already mentioned Malcolm, you mentioned Fidel, you know, your father came into contact with directly or indirectly, you know, every luminary and major historical figure and movement in the Black world and beyond. Where do people like Carlos Cooks and Marcus Garvey and Garvey's movement, you know, where do those tributaries of the African struggle, where was he with, you know, where did he fit?
Those are, I would say, there's a thing that has a picture of Garvey right? Then after Garvey, it has Malcolm, and then it has my father. There was this thing like Black conscious, but really, that's not how that collage should look. It should really be Garvey, Carlos Cooks, and my father. Like, so it was Garvey, Carlos Cooks is his ideological son, and then my father would basically come right under that. Carlos Cooks and Malcolm.
So that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Go ahead.
Because
Sorry.
initially, I mean, my father made a satire about Malcolm and they're eating pork. Malcolm liked it though. He's like, I got to meet this character. Malcolm had a great sense of humor. But really more so what their conflict had a lot to do with colorism. African Jazz Art Society said was coming out of the Nation of Islam in terms of our hair texture being a curse.
Right.
And some of them early speeches and all of that. That's really what a lot of the beef was about. And really Garvey was the stand. My father never met Marcus Garvey, although he was an emissary to his family. Just like he was an emissary to Patricia Lumumba's family. He never met either one of them, but their wives and their families, leaned on him and he worked with them. When Garvey's wife wouldn't deal with anybody else, she allowed Lambe to come in and spoke with him and sat down with him when she wouldn't allow any other media. But I think when it comes to Carlos Cooks had a sort of personality that was abrupt. He could be abrupt. And Malcolm wanted to work with Carlos Cooks, but Carlos Cooks' style was like, so when Malcolm came up to him one time after they had Nkrumah, they had Adam Clayton Powell, they had Malcolm, it was all of them. And initially Carlos Cooks was left out of that hosted in the meeting. He started going, street corner speakers. He got up on his perch, started going over there. They invited him over. He came, he blew the audience away. Later on, Malcolm came over to him and was like, how can we get together, brother? How can we get a program? I mean, how can we, work together? And Carlos Cooks sort of was dismissive and said, whenever you get a program. And, Malcolm humbled Malcolm said, thank you, my brother, and went away. I mean, Carlos Cooks shouldn't have handled the great Malcolm X like that, but that's actually what happened. There's a cartoon, I don't know if you saw it, that it's on the internet about that occasion in that event. But well, I'll send it to you. But to make a long story short, Malcolm's parents were Garveyites. Marcus Garvey at one time, when he come to Harlem, everybody would be, out on their windows in the window on their fire escapes, watching him and his army. He had these Black Nurses Legion, and he really brought a lot of Black women in, to the foray of leadership and sort of controlling his organization. He had a problem with his financials, the Black.
Well, that's sort of what I'm at. Like, never mind those specifics or the claims or the whatever, but the overall economic philosophy.
Oh yeah, definitely. Black. And that's what,
but
that's
what I'm saying. So where does your father's internationalism and socialism fit in what are sometimes seen as contradictions when we're talking about Garvey, Carlos Cooks, and that line?
Well, and that's one thing where because my father was a member of Carlos Cooks' African Nationalist Pioneer Movement, ANPM. But when Carlos Cooks, but at the same time, he had already founded African Jazz Art Society and Studio with my uncle in 1956. You know what I mean? So they were doing different things. Say, for example, Carlos Cooks didn't want no media. He wasn't for the outside media. He wasn't going to allow it in there. My father's coming from a creative visual arts background where it's about marketing and that sort of thing.
And journalism.
Journalism is exactly. So they're going to have different things. My father did a lot of those Carlos Cooks' early flyers and those sort of things. And if Carlos Cooks had not had the Miss Natural Standard of Beauty contest, my father probably would not have created the Grandassa models, which really kicked off the Black is Beautiful movement in 1962. My father actually came up with the Grandassa models concept in 1961. according to his peers and contemporaries. But then in 1962, they kicked it off in Harlem, and then they went viral. Next thing you know, they're on all these album covers and everything. You know, they got Max Roach and Abby Lincoln supporting them, especially networking. Miles Davis doing some back financing of them, and they really sort of took off and did that thing. But really, Carlos Cook's part of his whole thing, when he had the Miss Natural Standard of Beauty, it was just like one day, and not only that, so they saw that, all these black women with natural hair and in their natural beauty parading, showing like, because prior to that, everybody's hair was combed, even most of the men, so there's like, we gonna look at this different, especially my father's really coming out of a jazz music set, you know what I mean, with Lou Donaldson type of people, George Braith, all of these artists, at Cannonball Adderley, it's all these pictures of my father sitting down with all of these sort of guys. But then they started to politicize, that, especially once they checked. The name went from Jazz Art Society to African Jazz Art Society to African Jazz Art Society and Studio. They added the S because they added to the studio. That's when they moved from the Bronx to Harlem, right outside the Apollo Theater. And then there's a host of things that, transformed everything by being in the center of Harlem. And Harlem was the center of the Black world at that time. You know what I mean? Everything was, especially from a political formatting vantage point at that time. There was so much happening and so much going on. But it really was a combination of, because the Jazz Art Institute, there's some early books. My father did the illustrations in all of, in many of those books, it's
wow.
Again, in here, this book goes into downbeat jazz record reviews, beatbox jokes, because my father looked at like, a lot of the white interlopers and losing jazz. And not only that, having to go different places and hear jazz, like, we reclaiming jazz as an African art form, period, and that's
my
what
godfather calls it Black classical music or African classical music. He's like, he doesn't even use the word, he doesn't like the word jazz. So like, but listen, unfortunately, we got to wrap for now, but anything quickly that you would want us to know or follow up with, we got to get the book. I got to get the book now.
I would like to say right now, don't buy this book here.
Okay.
American Spy by Lauren Wilkinson. We have some issues that we're going to be dealing with them. That's a book that came out that's supposed to be turned into a novel. Barack Obama had it on the summer reading list, etc. But in this book, the author, Lauren Wilkinson, she has some information she says about the Patricia Mumba Coalition, where it's supposed to be the woman who's the first Black double agent spy. And she infiltrated the Patricia Mumba Coalition to, and she was an FBI CIA. Her job was to kill Thomas Sankara. And she knew that when Sankara came, that the only way she could get to him was going through the Patricia Mumba Coalition. And it's supposed to be a novel, so she's supposed to be able to legally get away with this. But she names a real life organization.
So what is this going to be? Judas and the Black Messiah Part 2?
Everything. That's
Judas and the Black Messiah.
Look at the new Garvey movie. That's also about his informants. Everything is about the informant. She's supposed to fell in love with Sankara, so she couldn't kill him. But it's from Harlem to Martinique and all of this. And they name her infiltrating my father's organization. Even in there, she says that she's supposed to have flipped a family member as a double agent.
Oh my God.
You know what I mean? So she has made, through a back channel media, a private apology, but that's not enough.
No.
Private apology? You got to be louder and more public an apology than you were in the lie in the first place to begin to heal.
She said that, our brother out of Houston, our great professor, Dr. Horn, said that they were going to be trying to turn this into a movie. That's definitely not going to happen, especially with Patricia Mumba Coalition being in a way that it's not. It's just a total exaggeration that of who Patricia Mumba Coalition were, its membership, its members, and just this was this organization. I mean, Patricia Mumba Coalition was an international organization. It was open for all types of different perspectives, and she just says it's just a cold Marxist organization that did this and did all of this in ex-Black. She doesn't have a grasp on what it is that although she says that she went there as a young girl and she was a fan of it, it's just the characterization and what they do can really be sort of dangerous. And look, I should make it clear, it's not Lauren Wilkinson. She doesn't reveal who the first Black woman double agent is, who the novel is based on. So I just like to make sure people don't buy this book, American Spy.
I just want to say real quick, just because I've just absorbed and soaked in everything that I've just been having a great time taking notes and I'm gonna be broke, all the books and yeah. But see, this is my problem with Black Girl Magic. This is my problem with this whole entertainment media complex, the propaganda arm of this empire weaponizing this idea of Black girl magic. This is what happens, where all of a sudden
eyes can be sisters too.
That's
yeah, but I mean, if you read it, Jackie, the sister in here that they're talking about, who, if anything comes at us, I still want to know her name. I want to know her real name.
Can we?
She's like a superhero. She's in our community. FBI, CIA, working both sides. She's allegedly she feels that because I don't. Listen.
No, we need to find out who she. We need to know.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, Cinque, Jackie, thanks to both of you. Please, if anybody can, if or is interested, and if you haven't already, become a member and join us in a few minutes for our fun a review of Boyce Watkins' work. But in the interim, Cinque, it's an honor to get to talk with you, for the first time publicly, and an honor to talk about your father. Personally, he was a giant for me, so I really appreciate this, and I cannot wait to do more. So I expect that's going to happen sooner than later. Please do stay in touch, man.
I look forward to coming back and
absolutely
talking about some more of the many things that we could talk about, because as I said, it's hard. It's so much.
Well, I'm gonna get the book you do want us to read today. I'm ordering it today. So when you come back, I'll be a little more ready, and we can get into a lot more. We'll set up and spend the whole couple hours. And
the essay book, you could only get this one because the essay book is sold out, and there's no reprints coming until September at earliest. So, but thank you, Jeff, for having me. Thank you, Jackie, for participating also. I look forward to meeting again with you guys in the future.
Yes, indeed. Peace, my man. Take good care. We'll talk to you soon. And thanks, everybody. Look, a quick transition here. If we didn't get to anything, like my man Pierre, Comedy Hype says, please
put it in the comments.
And we'll catch you on Monday morning right back here. But in a few minutes over there on the other live, and then at 11 o'clock back again for a Jabu Barak at the Ruba Bin Wahad. Get your bagel, get some coffee, quick bathroom break for some of us, and all that good stuff. And again, big shout out to Cinque, and thanks again to you, Jackie, for coming through. And thanks to Josh and Aaliyah for helping out in the background of all of this. So appreciate all of you.
Thanks.
All right, peace, everybody.
Have a great
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. What I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.